gentlemen, if we could now, could we have all of the candidates for the congressional seat for District 16 please come to the stage.
But let's welcome all the others as well. I mean, you're all very important. But Representative Mr. O'Rourke and I served on council for many years. Thank you.
All right, now that we have everybody at the stage, we'll start with a 2-minute introduction. And since Mr. O'Rourke is the closest one here on my left, if we could start with you, sir, you'll have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to see so many familiar faces, starting with Representative Emma Acosta. And I'm proud to have spent 6 years on the City Council. I just finished my 2nd term this summer, working for you and working with wonderful people like Emma, with Steve Ortega that I see in the audience, and our County Judge, Veronica Escobar, and dozens of other actively engaged citizens who are working to make El Paso better. In fact, we made some tremendous progress in a very short period of time over the last 6 years. In fact, last year, Newsweek magazine named El Paso the #1 can-do city in America. They looked at the top 200 cities across the United States and tried to find that city which had made the most progress in the shortest period of time on important quality of life issues, and El Paso came out on top. We're the #1 can-do city in America. I think that we need to bring that can-do attitude and that can-do spirit to Washington, D.C., and to our U.S. Congress, an institution that can't do, won't do, and hasn't been able to get the job done. And it doesn't help that we have a representative there who's missed more votes than almost any other member of Congress. 95% of the U.S. Congress shows up to vote and shows up to work more often than Sylvester Reyes. What does it mean for you and me when our congressman is in the bottom 5% of his class? It means long bridge wait times that threaten jobs in El Paso. It means a VA system that can't take care of its veterans and instead sends them to Albuquerque and to Big Springs, Texas. And it means a city that's not taking full advantage of its assets and capitalizing on what's wonderful about El Paso. You and I know that we can do and must do much better. And with your help and support and vote, we will. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for being here and having us here. My name is Barbara Carrasco. I'm a Republican candidate for U.S. District 16. I am a small business owner. I create jobs. I need a payroll. And I manage a budget. I'm a conservative, and I believe that we need to protect life, marriage, and the right to bear arms. When in Washington, I want to be your voice, your advocate. I will work to make sure that El Paso benefits from me being your representative. I will work on the issues that are important to El Paso. I will also work to stop the wasteful, reckless government spending. I will work to bring more jobs to the hardworking people of El Paso. We need to get the unemployed to work. And lastly, I will work on repealing our health care. And that's why I'm here today to ask you for your vote to help me stop the failed policies of Washington that have burdened our children with massive debt and have robbed future generations from special privileges that they have by this government. I'm the 3rd of 11 children. I was born in Grants, New Mexico. My father was a uranium miner. He contracted lung cancer at an early age, which prevented him from working. We all lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home that my father built for us. At a very young age, my dad would take us to Milan and we would pick peas and carrots. To this day, I cannot stand peas. At the age of 14, I took my first job in a restaurant as a dishwasher. So I'm not opposed to hard work. I know what being self-reliant does. I know that the American dream exists. And that's why I'm here to ask you for your vote to make sure that the land of opportunity that you and I inherited from our parents is the same land of opportunity that we leave our children. We do not want to leave our children a land of lost opportunities. So after 16 years of leadership, we need someone with a new vision and new perspective on the critical issues that face our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here this morning. Just like in other print broadcast media, this candidate has a tendency to be left off, not even being presented from the podium, so I'm glad that I can stand up here and say, my name is Jerome Tilghman, I'm a candidate for the 16th Congressional District, and if anybody tells you anything otherwise, tell them you saw me here and in person. You know, every candidate and every citizen has a larger responsibility in this election than simply competing for votes. The American flag, the fabric of American democracy, has a shameful, greasy spot. It's called the stain of corruption. Among the best things you can say about this candidacy is that it's not a part of any group, individual, any activity that has contaminated the political process here. People on the ballot whose resumes include or are connected to ethics violations, conflicts of interest, money laundering, disrespecting, and dismissing the express will of the people. None of these things inspire confidence in the political process, and our responsibility is to make sure, as every candidate is in this room and every citizen, to restore faith in the political process, starting right here at home. Our government saw fit to send me to school 3 times after college with a graduate degree in public administration, a second graduate degree in human resources development, and a third from the Command General Staff College to be able to do the best that I can to be as good a citizen, as a good representative, and as good a leader as I can possibly be. Those are skills that are unmatched by any other person on the podium, any other person on the ballot, and I ask for you to allow me to invest those credentials in the 16th Congressional District seat in the Congress of Washington, D.C. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Roen, running as a Republican here for 16th District. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel in the Army Reserves. I've been serving for 26 years. I have over 14 years of active duty time. Actually enlisted in the Army back in 1985. At that time, we took an oath of office, and I basically said, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, nothing's changed. I'm just moving on. I'm still in the reserves. But I still believe that our Constitution is being thrashed by Congress right now, what's going on. And I'm going to step forward, I'm going to rise up, and I'm going to help return our government to a government that is for the people, by the people. I believe in a limited constitutional government. I'm tired of all the big government that's going on right now. It's always more government programs, it's more money, it's more taxes. Let's raise the taxes, cut the taxes. I'm for lowering taxes at the federal level. If we can lower taxes at the federal level, we can put more people back to work. We can get our economy moving back again. So my #1 platform is jobs, jobs, jobs for the economy. And we're going to do it by lowering taxes. And we're going to be capitalistic instead of socialistic, which is where this country's going right now. I'm also a big believer in traditional family values. I'm a proud member of the Abundant Living Faith Center. I'm a born-again evangelical Christian. I do bring my Christian faith to this office. A little bit about myself. Got here to El Paso in 1990. Deployed to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I'm also a combat veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Actually just came back in September of this year. So combat veteran, I've led soldiers in combat. And I've worked for the city of El Paso. I've worked for UTEP for 4 years. I was the chief of staff over there in the ROTC department. I bring leadership and I bring a change to El Paso, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, Burges High School. Ladies and gentlemen here joining us in the audience. My name is Luis Torres, and in my official capacity, I serve as Legislative Director for Congressman Sylvester Reyes. As a volunteer and on my own personal time, I help volunteer in his campaign. I coordinate block walks for him and I try to spread the message of the great work that Congressman Reyes is doing. Unfortunately, the Congressman had a conflict today. He had an opportunity to speak directly and do a message for our troops that are stationed abroad. So he sends his regrets, but he certainly appreciates the invitation. We've worked very closely with Representative Acosta in the past, and we look forward to scheduling an opportunity to meet with the student body once again in the future. But we hope you can understand why he's not here with you today. I am here though, and I want to just share a couple of pieces of information. Congressman Reyes has had throughout his public service career, first of course serving as a Vietnam veteran, serving his country, then later spent 26 and a half years in law enforcement. In Congress, he's taken over 10,000 votes. He has directly authored language that has been included in over 70 bills that has resulted in billions of dollars in support for El Paso. Everything from helping rebuild the levees on the west side, or rebuilding and renovating the Plaza Theater, or perhaps the money that came to El Paso to save teaching jobs so that our teachers wouldn't be laid off. 28 million from the stimulus bill, for example. Or how about the over $11 million that came as a result of his vote for, again, the stimulus bill and the Affordable Care Act, which is already providing seniors with prescription services and helping reduce drug costs. That's the type of congressman that we want. He also fights for people with disabilities. He fights to ensure that seniors get their retirement benefits when they retire, on time. That's the man that's fighting for you in Washington, and on his behalf, I thank you for inviting him here today and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. If you could pass the microphone down, please, to Mr. Mendoza. Thank you very much. And Mr. Mendoza, you have 2 minutes here.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a humbling honor to be here this morning amongst constituents as well as students. This is a very, very important race, and the reason being is we are in the 21st century, and whom you elect is going to determine the direction that this community is going to take. So I would ask that you wholeheartedly pray for the correct person to be elected. It's very, very important. As for me, I am a Baptist Catholic. I was born in El Paso. I'm an Eagle Scout. I do not hold elected office. I have never held elected office. My sole mission is to serve you, to be your humble servant, irregardless of whether you are purple, orange, green, white, or black. I am here to serve you. And I ask that you take the time to think wholeheartedly as to who you want to represent. You had a congressman in office for a good period of time. He's served this community well, and it's time for him to stay home and take care of his grandkids. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now start with some questions from our students, and candidates, you will have 2 minutes to respond to each question.
This is a student question directed to Mr. Mendoza. Some states have passed same-sex marriage legislation. What is your position on this matter?
My answer is simple. I am vehemently against same-sex marriage. And I will tell you why. I think that if that was intended to be, it would have already been. Unfortunately, it's not, and it goes contrary to my faith, It goes contrary to the laws of the state of Texas, and by God, when I'm elected, your congressman, I will certainly vote against same-sex marriage.
Thank you. Now this question, a student question, is directed to Mr. O'Rourke. How do you think the legislation of marijuana will affect the economy?
I first spoke about our drug war and our problems with drug prohibition in 2009 after 1,600 people had been murdered in the most brutal fashion imaginable in our neighboring city of Ciudad Juarez. Since then, thousands more have died in equally horrible fashion, so that now over 10,000 people have been murdered in Ciudad Juarez over the last 4 or 5 years, making it the deadliest city in the world, bar none. I felt that I owed it to my community, my constituents, and my conscience to take this issue head on and find out why we have this kind of brutality in our community and what we could do to stop it. After much thought and research and consideration, it became obvious to me that drug consumption in the U.S., and let me make it clear, I don't want anyone to use drugs. I have 3 kids, I never want them to use drugs. And anyone who does use drugs in our community is contributing to the bloodshed and murder and terrorism that we see in Juarez. But given the fact that we have an insatiable appetite for marijuana in this community, in this country, including in this community, and given the fact that our prohibitionary laws have increased the value of marijuana to such a level that people are literally willing to kill each other to deliver this drug to the American market, I think that all options, including the regulation and taxation and control of marijuana, need to be on the table. How it affects the economy is far secondary to the moral imperative that we all must labor under to make sure that our fellow citizens and community members are treated with justice and do not have to endure the kind of terrorism and bloodshed that we've seen in our community for the last 5 years. And that's why I've discussed the issue, and that's why I think we need to continue to discuss it, and that's why we owe ourselves a resolution to this. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. This next student question is directed to Ms. Carrasco. Could you please name a time when you disagreed with the way Sylvester Reyes voted in Congress, and what is your rationale behind it?
I disagreed with his vote on health care. And the reason for that, we were told that 238,000 El Pasos would be insured. In reality, there's a report out there that says only 75% of El Pasos will be insured. And the reason for that is 75% are non-citizens. Another reason I disagreed with this vote on health care is there was a specific program in there for $85 billion, which we later found out was not even, they could not find a path forward on it. So my question would be, where are the $85 billion going to come from? The next reason I disagree is he told us it would not cover abortion. Well, you just recently saw what the president did with the churches in New York. Told the bishops that they have to provide contraceptions, do sterilization, and in some instances, provide abortions. The federal government has no right to tell the churches what to do. And another reason I objected to it is they reduced Medicare by $700 billion at a time when 10,000 baby boomers a day started retiring in 2011. And when it's all said and done, 30 million baby boomers will have retired. That means 30 million people are no longer paying into the system, but taking from the system. They are dipping into our Medicare program, and I call that an extreme ADD condition in Washington, and that is addictive dipping disorder. I coined that phrase. So that's another reason why healthcare is such a disaster. We've had 300 doctors already opt out of Medicare, and hundreds more are slated to opt out this year. The doctors are carrying the brunt on it. They're going to reduce their payments. Medicaid is going to be reduced. How can we protect and provide the medical care that we need for our seniors when they're cutting the doctors? I had a friend who went to the doctor the other day. He had a notice posted on his door, no longer accepting new Medicare patients. How can our seniors win? They can't.
Thank you, Ms. Carrasco. This next student question is directed to Mr. Tilghman. How do you plan to help and improve state education funding for Texas?
There's a broad bright line that separates me from other persons on the podium, specifically in the category of education. $4 to $5 billion was taken out of the state budget for public education. What you're doing is burning the future of the state. You jeopardize the future of the country by crippling its ability to grow its labor force through the classroom. The social, economic, and political future of this community and this country is in this gymnasium, representing the classrooms of Burges High Schools, classrooms all over El Paso County and throughout the United States. That $4.5 billion needs to come back in. The $140 million that the administration also took out of vocational education needs to be restored. The first and the worst thing we can do is impose a self-inflicted wound that causes students to have to go out and raise money by selling mattresses, chocolate bars, cookie dough to augment a budget that should take care of them from kindergarten to college. The last thing I want to say about that is, in terms of parenting, and I heard some good statistics up here about our teen pregnancy rate. Ladies and gentlemen, specifically those of you who are high school age and eligible, a whole lot of what's going to happen for this community and this country is going to be based on the attitudes, habits, and behavior patterns that you demonstrate today. Because everybody on this stage is going to have to pass this baton to somebody to continue to move this country forward. Undereducated populations, poor people, parenting too soon, are all self-inflicted wounds that's going to make that process that much more difficult. Funding dollars need to go back into education. We never seem to have enough money to educate you when you're 10, but we always find enough to lock you up when you're 20. I think that needs to be reversed.
Thank you, Mr. Tilghman. This next question is directed to Mr. Roen. Student loan debt is now greater than credit card debt in the United States. What are your plans to lower the interest rates on student loan debt and the rate at which it increases?
Okay, I am for smaller government, I'm for less taxes, so if we can get the economy moving again, the way it's supposed to, where people are all going to work, then we don't have to rely on the government for the loans, and we can get the loans lowered. So I'm all for education. If it's an education question, I'm all for education. I have a bachelor's degree myself. My parents were both educators. I worked at UTEP on the faculty there as a professor as well as community college. So I'm as big as for education as anybody in here. But in order to lower the interest rate on the student loans, it's just going to come down to getting the economy stimulated again, getting people back to work, more people paying taxes. If we get more people paying taxes, then we're going to have more money in the national treasury and take care of the student loan problem.
Thank you. This next student question asks, if Mr. Reyes was re-elected, how would he handle the implementation of Obamacare?
Well, thank you for the question. And the bill's called the Affordable Care Act. And there are a lot of disagreements in terms of what happened with the legislation. But I saw Mr. Reyes go on the floor, go to committee hearings every single day. I had the opportunity to see this man work. And he was very concerned about the 232,000 people that don't have health insurance, that didn't have health insurance. That estimate is incredibly high. And he felt that we had a responsibility to do everything we can to make sure that people had access to some form of health care. Certainly, the legislation, there has a lot of things that we need to go back and that we need to change, but the bottom line is, what type of society are we going to be when we see people who are sick, who are struggling, who may have some sort of disability and they need help, and we turn our back on them? That was the question that Congressman Reyes faced when he voted. And he said, it may not be perfect, but I am going to take this position. And if I lose my job because of my position, then so be it. And that's what he said at town halls when the rooms were packed in front of everybody, in front of the audience. And all these different issues that have been discussed here, some of them are very important and people feel very passionate about them. And some folks want to divide the community, to force people to take controversial positions on gay marriage, on legalizing drugs, on these sorts of things. But we don't have legislation like that. There's nothing on the floor right now that's moving that would legalize gay marriage, that would legalize marijuana. What is being debated is how do we stop bullying in our schools? How do we stop harassment in our schools? And Congressman Reyes is a champion for that. How do we get our teachers some sort of emergency funding to help them? How do we help our veterans? Make sure that they have access to care in every one of those areas. Congressman Reyes has been a champion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This question is for Mr. Mendoza. Mr. Mendoza, do you support the TRIO programs that are available for students? For example, the Upward Bound program at the University of Texas at El Paso?
Absolutely. I think that program is a sterling program. It has assisted and has motivated and has kept several disadvantaged students interested in education, and I really don't know exactly what the results have been, but I do know that several of those students that have gone through that program have completed their college degrees there at the University of Texas at El Paso, and I believe that that program should continue, and once I'm elected your congressman, I will do everything I can to make sure that that program continues to be funded because I believe it's an asset to this community. And that's all, folks.
Thank you. Mr. O'Rourke. A major issue lately has been the SOPA and PIPA bills. What are your views on this and how would you vote for them?
The Stop Online Piracy Act, or SOPA, and the accompanying PIPA bill, I think are both well-intentioned bills that seek to protect private property rights and intellectual property rights, and seek to encourage people to share their creative output online. So the intention is good. The law itself is terrible, and it's something I would definitely vote against because it would effectively restrict free expression on the internet. It would damage those things about our economy, and especially the internet-based economy that make the United States so vibrant. And so it's something that in its form right now I could not support or vote for. We have to remember that the internet economy, something that I've been lucky enough to have a small part in El Paso with a company I started about 13 years ago that's employed dozens of young El Pasoans in the kind of high-wage, high-technology jobs that far too often our young people leave El Paso to go find in other communities. That's one of the most vibrant aspects of the U.S. economy, and we need to be very careful when we do anything that would interrupt that. And with my remaining time, I want to make sure that everyone remembers and has heard accurately what the Congressman's representative just said in his last response to the last question. He basically said the issue of gay equality in the United States is a divisive issue and not one that he would support. And I want to make sure that that is clearly heard on the record. I know several people are taping this so we can replay that. And I think that's something that's incredibly embarrassing on behalf of El Paso and this community. I went to a meet and greet right here on Edgemere a couple of months ago at the home of a supporter. It is a gay couple, 2 women raising a number of children. And because of our current laws right now, if one of them should pass away, their children would end up in foster care because we don't have the kind of laws that we need in this country to protect and promote equality amongst all populations.
Thank you. A few of you have talked about how Port Bliss is expanding, but are bringing in outside contractors to expand. and you say Portland should use local contractors. How do you plan on making this possible?
One of the reasons that many of the contractors in El Paso don't get a job, number one, is the bond required. I'm a small business owner. I know what it is to a customer to ask them to put up $1 million bond. It's extremely expensive, and many small businesses can't afford $1 million bond. Contractors coming from out of town should be required to first access small businesses in El Paso who are qualified to do the work for them, rather than to bring in their qualified workers. So that should be a restriction, it should be a limitation on out-of-town contractors. And I think that would take care of the problem. But I want to address a statement that Mr. O'Rourke just made about these gay couple that couldn't, if one died, their child would be in state care. Well, that's not true. If they would prepare wills, do probate, go see a lawyer, that child would be taken care of no matter what they wish. The child is just not going to be left out there because one of the ladies passed away. So you might want to counsel them that way. Just to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tilghman, this is for you.
Same question?
No.
New question, okay. So we'll split this 3-3. You guys hang on to that one. We'll trade off this one. Go ahead, please.
A couple of you talked about the No Child Left Behind Act. What are your thoughts about it, and are you for or against it, and why?
I think No Child Left Behind has been crippling. I think that one of the things it has forced professional educators to do is to look at training to pass a test rather than educating to promote future long-term economic and intellectual growth. The Congress had an opportunity under the charter of the president to look at No Child Left Behind when the president first took office. That proposal sat in the legislative inbox to a point where the president had to step forward and make an executive order to take a long and hard look at that. We can train a chimp. We must educate the child. No Child Left Behind does not give teachers the prerogatives to use their imagination and creativity to inspire students to do well in the classroom. Our first focus needs to be to educate, to make sure that they are armed with the tools and talents they need to be quality contributors to the global economy. I also believe that when we look at teachers, not to look so much at whether or not the child is passing or not, but is the child smarter today than they were yesterday? And I think sometimes administrative pressures have been imposed on campus leadership to make sure that grades go in the book to advance the student demographic. But we underserve a population, and I speak to this in a metaphor. To give a student a grade would be equal to giving them a diploma saying they can swim, and then they believing that they can jump off a high dive and handle the deep water. It is a self-inflicted wound, and we will kill the child unless we make sure that it's education that we're about and not passing a test.
Thank you. Mr. Roen, the DREAM Act provides a path to citizenship for undocumented high school students. Do you think allowing this will encourage an increase in illegal immigration?
Read it again, the DREAM Act, say it again.
The DREAM Act provides a path to citizenship for undocumented high school students. Do you think allowing this will encourage an increase in illegal immigration?
Okay, I am opposed to any type of amnesty. I am opposed to the DREAM Act. So we are a country of laws, and because we're a country of laws, we need to enforce our laws. So no, I'm not for the DREAM Act. And to answer the question, yes, I think if the DREAM Act did pass, that it would want people to have illegal immigration would increase. So no, it's not a good law. And if I was, when I'm in Congress, I wouldn't vote for that. And it's not even on the floor right now in either session of Congress right now. So no, I'm opposed to the DREAM Act.
Thank you. The talk in Washington has been to cut federal spending in the Defense Department. If this does happen, how will this affect the expansion of Fort Bliss and the economic future of El Paso?
Absolutely. Well, Congressman Reyes believes that we need to make sure that we don't balance the budget on the most underserved people in our society. We can't balance the budget on the backs of seniors. We can't balance the budget on the backs of children. We can't balance the budget on the backs of veterans. There are people in our society that we see as people that are worth defending, even when in times when the economy is the way it is. We need to make difficult decisions, but the difficult decision shouldn't be for the senior who is on a limited income and on a fixed income. It shouldn't be a difficult decision for them. The difficult decision comes when we need to look at repealing the Bush tax cuts for the super wealthy, and Congressman Reyes opposed them, and he opposed them again. We need to look at comprehensive immigration reform. We need to look at other different ways of stimulating the economy, of moving forward, looking at energy conservation, trying to protect Fort Bliss. The Budget Control Act, which was passed by the Republican majority in the House, would severely make cuts across the board, including some that could potentially hinder the progress we have made at Fort Bliss. And some of the congressman's opponents here have said that they would actually vote for it. Now, let's go back to these other questions that were just raised. The embarrassing thing here isn't that there is passionate debate on both sides for these several different issues. The embarrassing thing here is that there are people in this room, on this panel, that voted to cut housing, affordable housing for people with disabilities. People standing here today, speaking up in front of this audience. There are people in this room who have said they would raise the retirement age on senior citizens, that we need to look at means testing seniors as a way to close this budget deficit that you're talking about. There are people here who are trying to legalize marijuana, and wherever you stand on those issues, the point is that it sucks the air out of the room when we need to be focusing on jobs, educating our kids, and keeping our kids safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, candidates, we will now go to some questions from the audience, which we have a good number of. Your response time for these questions will be 1 minute.
I have a little commercial break. There's two candidates in our audience. We have Dolores Reyes for judge, running for judge of the 41st District Court. And Diana Navarrete, running for criminal court District Court. Okay, that's your commercial break. We'll continue now.
This audience question is going to be asked to Mr. Mendoza. Explain the difference between the deficit and debt and how to address them.
Well, that's a loaded question. The deficit and the debt. Well, the deficit continues to rise because we continue to spend what we don't have. And the debt continues to grow because we continue to add to the deficit. That's my explanation, and that's all, folks. But aside from that, I'm pretty much concerned with the person that represents Mr. Reyes here on this panel. He talks about comprehensive immigration. Well, you know, I voted for Mr. Reyes when he first ran. I even contributed to his campaign, and I'm still waiting for comprehensive immigration. It's been 15 years. To me, that's more than the Coons age. That's all, folks.
Mr. Mendoza, gambling is a big problem in the communities where gambling is allowed legally. Gambling can turn into an addiction that affects not only the individual, but who becomes the gambler, but it also affects his/her family due to its negative impact on finances and family relationships. If you are in favor of legalizing gambling in El Paso, Piguas, what would you do to address the issue of gambling as an addiction?
Jesus, you know, we have all kinds of addictions. People smoke, people drink, people have certain sexual predilections, which is an addiction. We have all kinds of addictions. You know, the proceeds from the gambling addiction, from legalized gambling here at the Tigua Reservation, which unfortunately I believe it's a federal issue and not so much a state issue. That the proceeds from when gambling is legalized with the Indians here in El Paso, there should be an endowment fund set up so that those that are addicted to gambling are given counseling. Of course, it's like anything else. You know, you can take a horse to water, but it's up to the horse to drink. And that's all, folks.
Thank you. Mr. O'Rourke, how can you assure that my vote will be negated in the future? Majority rules.
I'll answer this question in the spirit it was asked, and it was asked about the domestic partner benefits issue, one that I'm very proud to be associated with the city of El Paso. In fact, along with Steve Ortega and many other members of City Council, we asked that domestic partners be covered by the city's health insurance the same way that married partners are, and we got that passed. When a very poorly worded citizen initiative passed at the ballot a year ago, November, and not only stripped the benefits from the half dozen or dozen domestic partners, but also stripped benefits from hundreds of retirees from the city of El Paso, retired police officers and firefighters. I, along with 4 other members of council and the mayor, voted to make sure that those benefits were kept. We had no idea whether the people who were going to be affected and who would have their benefits stripped had cancer, were receiving chemotherapy, or were perfectly healthy. And in good conscience, we could not vote to strip those benefits.
Thank you. The audience would also like to ask. The audience directed this question to you. How do you feel that legalizing marijuana will eliminate drug use?
Sorry, repeat the question.
How do you feel that legalizing marijuana will eliminate drug use?
It's interesting that I seem to be getting all the fun questions at today's show. I don't think legalizing marijuana would alleviate drug use. And again, my bottom line when it comes to drug policy and our response to the drug war that has cost this country $1 trillion, that's put more people in prison in the United States than any other country in the world, that has led to the death of almost 60,000 people in Mexico, 10,000 in Juarez alone, is that all options need to be on the table. We need a more rational drug policy that accounts for the consumption in the United States, the production and transit in other countries, and is fairest to all concerned. And that's my bottom line. Whatever that policy is, I'll support, but I think all options need to be on the table. And doing the same thing over and over again, as we've done for the last 40 years, and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Ms. Carrasco, as Congresswoman, would you support community-based in-home services and support for disabled to be kept out of nursing homes? Also, no cuts on Medicaid program.
I think if you have loved ones who want to take care of their elderly at home, they should have the privilege of doing it. As far, and you said Medicaid? Yes. You have Medicaid coverage? That's something that's a complex issue. It starts at the national level, and it comes down to the state. And health care is one of the main killers in Medicare and Medicaid, so that has to be addressed. But I'd like to make a comment regarding something that Congressman Reyes' representative said. He said that they want to raise the limit on the elderly for Medicare. That's not true. The proposal out there is to raise the limit on people who are not on their Social Security or Medicare benefits now. The next thing he said, they want to do means testing on everybody. That's not true. They want to do means testing on rich people, people who don't necessarily have or need or want Medicare later on down the road. And the next thing he said is, Congressman Reyes is all about energy. Congressman Reyes voted for cap and trade, a job killer. Texas lost 10 oil and natural gas wells just recently, so jobs is not his priority.
Thank you, Ms. Carrasco. The next audience question is, there's a large number of people who are homeless, not only at the local level, but nationally. What would you do to address the issue of homelessness?
Is that to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You know, that's a complex one too. A lot of homeless people don't know that there are facilities or there are agencies that can help them. We need to find a way to direct them there. I don't know how you could go out and pick all the homeless people and direct them. I'm aware of some social security, some veterans that are entitled to benefits that are wandering the streets and don't know they're entitled to benefits. That's something that the VA has to direct. I'm sure there's a lot of other homeless people out there that are there because of drug, alcohol, or whatever addiction they have, which is sad. But it's a personal choice too. We need to take responsibility for our actions. Not that we don't want to give them help, because I'm all in favor of a helping hand, but I'm not in favor of a perpetual helping hand. So people have to be responsible for their own actions. Accountability counts.
Thank you, Ms. Carrasco.
These audience questions are for Mr. Tilghman. The state legislature took $4.5 billion in public education funds. What do we need to do to get that money back?
That's a great question, because that's my question. And I asked that to the state legislators. But I'm glad to be able to address it, because when these items were being discussed, or the persons who are here on the dais today, I saw no one in the audience to stand up and speak against those draconian budget cuts. At a time where we have persons who are refugees out of Juarez needing post-traumatic stress disorder treatments, soldiers coming off of the battlefield who need those same kinds of services, we don't want to take funds away from those avenues to address the problem. We have done that. I think those funds need to be restored. We need to take a second look at the budget to see how those dollars can come back into public education to provide for the assets and resources we need to take care of that challenged population.
Thank you. This question is also directed to you, Mr. Tilghman. Are you aware of the cuts in education? The 2011-2012 teacher contract states a minimum amount of days and teachers are on call with one more class a day and without any extra compensation. Administration keeps on growing. Teachers keep shrinking. How do you feel that this helps education?
How do I think it helps education? It does not. Using a soldier metaphor, you put your resources, the best resources you need, you put them on the front lines. The front line, in this case, is the classroom. You don't need to commission another string of generals at the administrative level. Where you need your foot soldiers in this battle for ignorance is in the classroom. Provide every venue and every resource possible to make the teacher armed to the teeth to educate the population that's going to run and rule this country in the future. Anything other than that is a self-inflicted wound. Those funds need to come back, and they need to come back now. If we're going to reduce anything, reduce your administrative load, put the resources in the classroom where they'll give you the best benefit, the best bang for the buck.
Thank you. Mr. Roen's question is for you. As a congressman, would you support accessible, affordable, and integrated housing for the disabled?
Yes, of course I would support that for the disabled, for the needy. That's why we have the programs that are in place out there. So absolutely, it's responsibility of your representative to represent you in El Paso. So I would definitely be eyes, ears, hold committee meetings, with the disabled, pretty much on a monthly basis. and look at the issues and then try to get funding for those type of issues. And so I do definitely support that type of legislation. Yes.
This question is for the representative, Mr. Reyes. Have you studied the drug laws in Europe, and if so, how are they different from those in the United States, and should the United States implement these laws?
Well, I think the larger point is whether the congressman would support efforts to legalize drugs. And the answer is no. The congressman disagrees with that approach, and he said that multiple times. He said that before. He thinks that we need to do everything we can to help keep our students in school, help keep them drug-free, help get them the opportunity to go to college and to support them. That's what he believes we need to focus on. But before I go in deeper on that, I just want to say here, because I did mention something. The Roen budget ends Medicare as we know it. Some people here may be okay with changing the guaranteed program benefits under Medicare for some people in the future, but the congressman is not okay with that. Some people may be okay with raising the retirement age on seniors in the future. The congressman is not okay with that. Social Security didn't add a dime to the deficit, and yet it's being targeted. There are other things that did add to the deficit, and we need to look at those. Thank you.
This next question is for all the candidates, and we will be on with Mr. Mendoza. Obamacare will start deducting $3,000 from Social Security retirees annually. Can this be changed?
Yes, it certainly can be, and it should be. I have a letter here. It's really interesting. I think Obamacare, unfortunately, most of the congressmen, and maybe including our congressman, didn't really read the bill as it was written. It's a lot of reading, and if you're not an avid reader, or if you do not speed read, it would be difficult to understand and comprehend what you're voting for. And I stand in solidarity with Bishop Ochoa, where he says that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced last week that almost all employees, including Catholic employers, will be forced to offer employees health coverage that includes sterilization, abortion, induced drugs, and contraceptives, etc. I believe that all Catholics and all Protestants alike should stand in solidarity and not pay your income tax this coming April 15th in order for us to send a message to Mr. Obama.
Thanks. I think the recently passed Health Care Act does a lot of good things, especially for a community like El Paso. As has been pointed out, almost a third of our population does not have health insurance. The Health Care Act also makes sure that people with pre-existing conditions can get coverage. It does a lot of good things, but there was a uniquely blown opportunity for El Paso when we did not have a representative who stood up for our interests. When that Health Care Act was being debated, Sylvester Reyes did not tackle the most significant problem that we have in our community, and that is the incredibly low reimbursement rate for Medicaid and Medicare actions that are performed in this community. It's why we have a doctor-to-patient ratio that is third world standard, 126 doctors per 100,000 patients. That's what you see in the developing world in Syria and Panama, not in El Paso. If I had been the representative, I would have fought for the inclusion of a higher reimbursement rate in El Paso. It would have led to better health care and better health outcomes for our citizens.
Thank you, Mr.
I disagree with healthcare in its form. We were told, pass it and see what it's in it down the road, away from the fog. Well, we've seen what's in it. It's causing our Medicare program to go broke. It's causing our doctors to leave the profession. And we don't have 232 uninsured in Texas. That is a myth. And the pre-existing condition program, the reason people in the program right now, in the healthcare program, are not in it is because it has too many limitations, and get a load of this. The premium is is too high. You can talk to individuals here in El Paso who try to get on a pre-existing condition. It doesn't help us. It deteriorates a condition that's already existing. If they had read the bill, and if Congressman Reyes read the bill, then he misled us of what was in it. We also asked him about abortion. He said it will not cover abortion. I said, our money is fungible. How can it not cover abortion? I'm sure it doesn't cover abortion. He did not read the bill. If he read the bill, he misunderstood it. If he read the bill, then he misled us because it covers abortion. He just read a few statements from the church.
Thank you. Mr. Tilghman, the same question.
Under the Affordable Care Act, you want to make sure you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are some redeeming qualities in that piece of legislation. The pre-existing conditions, one, I think is key and critical, especially as it pertains to the demographic here of the 16th district. I think because the reimbursement rates were not appropriately addressed, it contributes to the doctor shortage that we suffer from, and speak to the ratios that Mr. O'Rourke addressed as well. That was another pinpoint issue that we needed to fight. The one thing we need to make sure of, too, is a key provision in there that allow young people to continue to stay under the umbrella of their parents' coverage through age 26 in these economically austere times. There are a lot of positives in the legislation. It needs to be examined, it needs to be scrubbed. Let's lift out those things that serve the best interests of this district and the United States overall, and for those things that don't pass the make sense test, let's put those back in front of our legislators for a good, strong debate on the best ways to correct that piece of legislation.
Thank you.
We should have studied the bill before. We wouldn't be in this position right now.
Mr. Roen.
It's a terrible law. I believe it needs to be repealed and replaced. It needs to be thrown out. It's like 2,700 pages. Probably about 10 pages would have covered it. Like Mr. Tilghman said, keeping the pre-existing conditions covered is probably a pretty good idea. Closing the donut hole is a pretty good idea for the seniors. There's a few things in there probably can be covered in about 10 pages. The other 26, 100 pages can be thrown out for sure. But really, it's not even about healthcare. Really, I see it a big government program that is there to basically control the individual. So the government can make decisions for us. I think that the family needs to make decisions. Individuals need to make decisions. It's not about the government making the decisions with their death panel saying, you can live, you can have this surgery, you can't. So no, I think it needs to get thrown out. The United States already had the best medical coverage in the world. It needs to be tweaked, but the program itself is going to be thrown out by the Supreme Court, and we're going to probably start over.
Well, Congressman Reyes disagrees with a lot of these points here. He supported the president's plan. He supported the Affordable Care Act. He supported it because he believes fundamentally that if there is a sick person, we need to treat them. And it's our responsibility to do that. Yes, there are issues with the bill. And he's been at the table to negotiate those issues. And the doctor fix, which is extremely important because we have a lot of doctors here in El Paso. Here's a fact. Congressman Reyes voted to implement a doctor fix in the healthcare bill. The other party decided that it was too expensive, so they removed it from the bill. And that's the contention that there exists in Washington. Now, the larger issue here is what type of society are we going to be? Are we going to sit back and let people go untreated, or are we going to do something about it? Congressman Reyes stood with the president, stood with El Paso, and he's proud of his vote for the Affordable Care Act. Thank you.
Mr. O'Rourke, we have another audience question for you. If elected, what would you do differently from what Mr. Reyes has done so far? How would you achieve your goals of those of whom you will represent if elected?
I would be accountable. I would be responsive to my constituents. On City Council for 6 years straight, I held a weekly constituent meeting where I was accountable for my actions during the previous week's council meeting and informed my constituents about the issues and agenda on the following week's meeting. I'd show up to work. On the City Council, I was involved in every major decision, and we've heard about some of the controversial ones that I was a part of. but I was also part of decisions that made sure we had a balanced budget every single year I was on city council. We have a congressman today, to answer your question and show the contrast, who's missed more votes than almost any other member of Congress. We have a congressman today who, after 16 years, has only passed 6 bills. 2 of those were to rename buildings in downtown El Paso. And we have a congressman today on the most important issues of our time, on the issues we know better than anyone else: immigration, the drug war, trade, bilateral relations with Mexico, is nowhere to be found.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. This next question is for all candidates, and we'll begin with Mr. Mendoza. How will the proposed legalization of drugs impact El Paso students and families?
Could you repeat that question?
How will the proposed legalization of drugs impact El Paso students and families?
God, that's another one. But I tell you, first of all, legalization of drugs, I'm not for it wholeheartedly. But if that were ever to happen, it would certainly have a great impact. Let me tell you something. There's kids. I was talking to a student at Burges High School who said that over the weekend he smoked marijuana with his mother and his grandmother. You know, back in the day when I was growing up, that was totally unheard of. And for him to be so cavalier about saying that and not thinking that it was, you know, was anything wrong. First of all, it's against the law. But you see, you know, I just find it incomprehensible for us to go in that direction. You know, maybe the medicalization or pharmaceuticalization of marijuana, but not the legalization. Everybody start growing them at home. And that's all, folks.
Sure, thanks. I think the reason this question keeps coming up is because people realize that after 40 years of a failed policy, we can and we must do better. It's not politically convenient to do so, it's not easy, but it must be done, and no one knows that better than El Paso. We live next to the deadliest city in the world, 10,000 dead in the last 4 or 5 years. Our safest city designation is cold comfort in light of that. And you and I know that, and no one knows it better than the kids who attend Burges High School or the kids who went to the middle school before here. After 40 years, $1 trillion spent, more people in prison than any other country in the world, the easiest place to find marijuana is right here in a high school or a middle school. So, for someone like Congressman Reyes to say he's proud of his work on the drug war, what is there to be proud of? What have we accomplished? Don't we need to do something different? Don't we need to do something better? Don't we owe ourselves, and especially our children, a better policy? I think the answer is obviously yes. Thank you.
I'm definitely not in favor of legalizing drugs. And I'm going to give you an example. I was on the freeway the other day. Actually, I was at the stop sign. There's a car catty corner for me. There's a gentleman in a car. I thought he was eating an apple. This is a true story. All of a sudden, I see smoke coming up. I had to get on the phone and call my son. Martin. And I told him, there's this guy over there, smoke's coming out of his leg. He said, Mom, he's actually smoking marijuana. He had his head like this on the headrest. And I'm thinking, this gentleman is on the road. He will jeopardize, he could kill somebody. They shouldn't be on the road. So I'm not for that. I've spoken to teachers, and they've told me what their students are like when they come into the classroom hiding. You have to literally nudge them. And they are so incoherent, she says. If they legalize drugs, I hate to see what the students are that I have to deal with. So no, we shouldn't legalize drugs. It's a controversial issue, but legalizing it is not going to help anybody, especially our children. We want the bright students to go onto college. We want them to compete globally, and this is not going to help a young mind mature.
Thank you. Mr. Tilghman.
Yeah, thank you. The Army Substance Abuse Program on Fort Bliss, through its processing of soldiers either going into or coming out of the theater of operations, has processed over 136,000 substance abuse cases. You have eroded military readiness when you make it more accessible to have narcotics or any other judgment-banning substances. Liviane said we had over 100,000 addicts already that we are treating. It doesn't pass the Make Sense test to add one other thing to the menu of bad choices that people are making. People on cell phones, we already have an epidemic of alcohol-related accidents on the highways today. You can't turn on the news without seeing somebody killed or property damage as a result. You don't need to add another item on the menu that's going to impair the judgment of people any place in the society. This idea, as well-intended as it might be, is a bad one. I do agree that strategies that have been imposed in the past are not working, but legalization is not good, nor is ignoring the war next door.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Roen?
Okay, so I think you asked the question was how would it impact El Pasoans and their families? Boy, I haven't come up with a list real quick. We could have more crime in our city. Well, that sounds like a great plan. More domestic violence. Not for that. More unemployment. How about, increase the need for more government programs? Now we got to get these people off drugs, so it's going to impact there. Hey, we could have more high school dropouts. That's a bad thing. More infidelity, more divorce. So it would impact El Paso in a truly, truly negative way. We said drugs, but then they use marijuana. Next thing you know, they're doing cocaine and heroin. And it's just a gateway drug. So it'd be a terrible thing for the city of El Paso to legalize any type of drug use. Me, myself, never used any drugs, never will use any drugs. Drugs are bad, so totally unsupportive of legalization in any way.
Sure, and I think I answered this earlier. Congressman Reyes is opposed to legalizing drugs. He has a disagreement, a fundamental disagreement with one of the proponents here who wants to push that issue. But perhaps the saddest thing, though, is what you do with your leadership when you come to office. That is not the congressman's priority. The congressman's priority is to stick up for seniors, to stick up for people with disabilities, to stick up for children, to stick up for teachers. That's what we should be talking about, and yet we have 4 questions about legalizing drugs. How are you going to use your leadership? Those other issues, there are people in front of you who are asking you to protect their right, to protect access to the basic services that everybody else has. And people on this panel have turned their back on them. Think about that. Think about it. Congressman Reyes is going to continue the work that he's doing. He's going to continue supporting El Paso. He has a 96% attendance record. That is a great record, and we're very proud of him. Thank you.
This next question is directed to all candidates, starting with Mr. Mendoza. The government health care bill, Obamacare, provides for insurance which covers providing for abortion bills. Should Catholic charities and businesses owned by Catholics opposed to abortion be required or mandated to comply and provide such insurance?
Absolutely not. And as you stopped me on the last question, like I said, I have a letter here from the bishop, which is going to be read to it's going to appear in all the bulletins in all Catholic churches. And it's important that the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States denying to Catholics our nation's first and fundamental freedom of religious liberty as a result. Unless this rule is overturned, we Catholics will be compelled to be prepared to either violate our conscience or drop our health care coverage for our employees. And this is going to impact a lot of not just Catholic but as well as Protestant businesses. And I believe that we need to stand in solidarity with the bishop and oppose this caveat in this healthcare mess. And that's all, folks.
Thank you. Mr. O'Rourke.
There was already a provision in the law that allowed churches and religious organizations to be exempted from this provision. I don't see why we couldn't extend it to Catholic hospitals, for example, or other affiliated organizations and allow them to have that exemption as well. So that's where I stand on it. I will also add that I am a Catholic. I was born and raised a Catholic, but I also believe in a woman's right to choose. And that's not something that I'll equivocate on or pander to both sides of the issue on as our current congressman has tried to do. You can't have it both ways. You need to have the courage of your convictions, stand up for what you believe in, vote accordingly, and move forward. And that's what I would do as your U.S. congressman. Thank you. Mrs. Carrasco.
In order to get the health care bill passed, if you will recall, President Obama signed an executive order. Had he not signed the executive order, Stupak and his gang of 10 would not have gone on board for the health care. In that executive order, he promised health care would not cover abortion. Look what he just did now with the Catholic churches. It covers abortion. That's why this bill should have been read, should have never been implemented, because there's so much controversy. And this is an example of an overreaching government. They're quick to do things. Let's pass the bill. We need the bill. We can't wait. That's what we get out of Washington. We need to wait. We need to read the bill. We need to research the bill, and we need to analyze the bill before they do anything in Washington. And they wouldn't be dividing our country. We are divided on immigration. We're divided on abortion. There are too many issues we're divided on.
Thank you, Ms. Carrasco.
Would you restate the question for us, please?
The government healthcare bill, Obamacare, provides for insurance which covers providing for abortion bills. Should Catholic charities and businesses owned by Catholics opposed to abortion be required or mandated to comply and provide such insurance?
No. The provisions in this bill are so convoluted and so confusing because it was not vetted properly. It turned out to be, in my estimation, a political expedient. If it's worth doing well, and it's worth the appropriate vetting process. We need to examine the value systems that the nation stands under, and then pass laws that are a reflection of those value systems. Unless and until we're willing to step forward, do the necessary vetting process to lift the most positive things from the health care bill that we can, remove those things that don't pass the make sense test or are in contravention to the value systems of the community and the country, we're not going to get a good quality health care piece of legislation. It's a hard bill to pass. It needs the appropriate vetting process, and we need people who will stand up for the strength of their convictions to make sure we get good legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roen?
I'd start off and say, what has happened to our society that we can get to a point where the government of all people, I'm for individual liberty and freedom, why the government would get involved with telling somebody, you have to fund abortion pills of all things, so no, I'm totally opposed to that. I would even say we need to get Roe versus Wade overturned right now. Probably happen in a constitutional amendment to do so, but let's say abortion is what abortion is. It is murder. Once at conception, baby's born, and it's terrible if the government would be involved with something like that, forcing people to pay for out of our taxpayer money to support murder.
Thank you, sir. Representative?
Sure, and I think what you're probably hearing here is the passionate debate that I was referring to earlier, that there are some issues that strike a very powerful chord with a lot of people in our community. And so the question is then, how are we going to bridge that divide? How are we going to move forward? Because there are some folks who absolutely do not want to move forward when it comes to certain issues of importance to them. With regards to the Catholic hospitals, the congressman wants to make sure that he understands all the facts fully and has been in contact with the administration to figure out exactly what this new set of guidelines will affect, how it will affect our community. And I think that is a reasonable and rational approach. Before we get into all the rhetoric about saying things are murder and saying people are pro this and pro that, we need to look at the facts. And I think that's the person you have in office now. He's a middle-of-the-road man who has the courage of his convictions and will continue to represent you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question for you, guys.
While we're waiting for the question, We have with us another trustee from EPISD, Mr. Beto O'Rourke. He just got here, right there. Thank you for being here.
This final question is directed to all candidates. If elected, what is your point of view in reference to the danger that Iran's threats against the United States of America represents? How would you address that issue? If elected, what is your point of view in reference to the danger that Iran's threats against the United States of America represents? How would you address that issue?
You know, that's a great question. Iran, first of all, doesn't have an air force, doesn't have a navy. How could they possibly be a threat to us? You know, that's beyond comprehension. Iran is really not a threat to us, as far as I'm concerned. Period. And that's all, folks.
Thank you. Mr. Roen.
You know, Iran, a country that has vowed to wipe Israel off the face of the map, which has vowed holy war against the United States, and which is now trying to develop an atomic weapon, simply cannot be allowed to have this capacity. And I think the United States needs to do everything within its power to ensure that it does not develop this capability, and no option, as the President has said, should be removed from the table. However, unlike our current Congress, I do believe that any time the United States enters into a military action, that military action needs to be declared by the United States Congress. That's a power vested in that institution by the U.S. Constitution, and it's a power that's been abused by this and former presidents. And so I firmly stand for a sober, honest deliberation on the issue before we ever commit U.S. forces if that's ever necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Roen. Ms. Carrasco.
Iran is a dangerous threat. They're working on a nuclear bomb. They hate Israel. They hate us. And hate is a strong word, but that's what Iran does. They want to kill everybody in Western society. We need to be careful to have every option on the table. Don't take anything for granted. You cannot let a country like Iran, who doesn't believe in the Holocaust, who has hatred, and I keep using the word hatred because it's a strong word, because he comes here to the United States and speaks to at the UN, and he uses this vitriolic hatred language against us. So we need to be careful, and I say everything's on the table. We need to protect the United States. We need to protect Israel. They are allies, and we love them. Thank you.
See, what has put us in this compromising position is that we were so quick to swipe the national credit card to fight wars in the past. The defense secretary has come here. We have a force reduction right now. So we are minimizing our capability to address a number of threats. Having said that, I am on the page with the president. We need to impose every possible alternative before we want to quickly push the send button. We have exhausted our military in Southwest Asia. Not to say that they will not be called upon to do the same things. Again, the economic sanctions, I think, are going to be good moves. We need to understand that the Straits of Hormuz, if they are blockaded, will diminish oil flows to the entire international economy. Those are variables we need to make sure that we understand. But make sure that we are not abusing and exhausting our soldiers by constantly pressing the send button and sending them into harm's way, especially by people who have never donned a uniform, never picked up a rifle, never put their boots on the ground, and never put their life in jeopardy.
Thank you, Mr. Tilghman. Mr. Roen.
So I've been in the Army Reserve for 26 years. Totally believe that Iran is a huge threat to the United States, to our national defense. I hope I'm wrong, but I can see them coming across the border of Iraq now that we've pulled out of there. So we definitely need to be concerned about them. The president there of Iran has said that he will use weapons of mass destruction against Israel, which in turn he will use them against the United States. So we need to do all we can to make sure that they don't have those weapons of mass destruction. And They are a threat to us. They are definitely a threat. Diplomacy doesn't seem to want to work with them. They want to destroy the world. They want to bring in the 12th Imam. You know, it's a Muslim thing, and they need to not do that. We need to defeat them all we can. If we do, we need to go that route.
Thank you, Mr. Representative.
I think Congressman Reyes would say that we need to remain vigilant. He is served as chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Actually was the only chairman in Texas, full committee chairman, for a period of years, and got daily briefings on the intel situation across the world. Congressman Reyes understands threats, asymmetrical threats. He understands the cost. He understands the sacrifice, not just through literature and by reading and whatnot, but he has served on the ground as a Vietnam veteran who lost his hearing. He understands that there is a sacrifice. He understands that our troops need to be supported. We can't just send them off to war. He voted against the Iraq War. But he also understands we need to take care of them when they come home. He's worked to secure $1 billion for the William Beaumont Hospital, for example, and to ensure that our veterans are treated properly, with dignity, with respect. That is part of the whole conversation. So yes, he understands the threat. He stands with our president. We need to look to all security threats very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, before I give you 1 minute for your closing statement, I again would like to please give us a big round of applause for our students who are here moderating this fantastic debate. We appreciate it. Thank you very much, students, for your performance. And we would like to give each candidate 1 minute for the closing remarks. We'll start on the far end, please, with Mr. Torres.
Well, it's been a privilege for me to sit here to tell you about, to give personal testimony on the work that Congressman Reyes has done. Here are the facts. Over 10,000 votes, over 70 bills that include language directly authored by the congressman that have produced billions of dollars for El Paso. What's most important at the end of the day is not what politician's name is on a bill, but that the bill happens, that it includes language that impacts El Paso, because at the end of the day, El Paso is what matters. Congressman Reyes understands that. He's a workhorse, and he'll get things done. Billions for the community. I've listed several examples, but I'll share a couple more. The $1 billion from the stimulus bill, which was adamantly opposed by the other side, was able to bring 200 new buses, new bus terminals, 2 Head Start centers, the East Side Spaghetti Bowl, the Veteran Transition Complex. All of that were dollars and resources that came into El Paso that are connected and linked to decisions made by the congressman. Support Congressman Sylvester Reyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Roen, you have 1 minute.
All right, I want to thank Ms. Acosta for putting this together. This has really been excellent. It's the first time in many, many years we've actually had 2 Republicans debating with the Democrats here, so it's really excellent that we get to bring out more than one perspective. I think I'll be a great candidate. I am a great candidate for you. Can bring great change to El Paso. Stand for great values, national defense, limited government. Let's get the economy going. We hardly even really talk jobs. We're talking mostly social issues in here, which was great. So let's not always remember the #1 priority. Let's work on jobs, the economy, lowering taxes, getting people back to work. A lot of the issues we have will go away if there's more money, more people are working. So vote for me. My name is Corey Roen. I'm a Republican running for U.S. Congress.
Mr. Tilghman, you have
Yeah,
1 minute.
the country's at a $15 trillion debt. You need more than just a voter. You need somebody who is a strong messenger, who can deliver a strong message to influence legislation in a favorable direction. The broad, bright line that distinguishes me from others, specifically the incumbent and other challenges here. 6 years on council, 16 years in the Congress. These problems did not manifest themselves right away. They have been building over time. And if you take a look at the results of the combination of those years in office, a 25% wage gap between women and men in this 16th congressional district. We have wages 30% below the national average in terms of per capita income. There's a $22,000 gap between the average American and the El Paso one in terms of median income. 4 go to bed hungry every day in a community that is next door to the largest market for drugs in the world. We need to put leadership in place that's going to correct those problems, and the Tilghman candidacy will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Carrasco.
Thank you. I would ask the population of El Paso in 2012, I would challenge you. I challenge you to follow the candidates here. Follow the issues. See what we stand for. See what our values are. Because we have career politicians who have led us to where we're at. Our country is polarized. We are divided. We have lots of important, critical issues facing our nation that career politicians are not willing to take action on it. They don't have the political will to solve our problems. And it could be solved. We need people in Washington with new ideas and a new perspective on the problems that we have in the United States. There isn't any reason after all these years that we are still divided on immigration. We shouldn't be divided on health care. We shouldn't be divided on cap and trade. But we are divided because these politicians come home, they listen to us, they go back to Washington, and they're in their own circle again. They have become desensitized to their constituents. Y al escribirme, por favor, voten Latina en la oficina. Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. O'Rourke.
When I first ran for public office in 2005 against then City Councilman Anthony Cobos, I ran because I was excited about the opportunity in El Paso. But I was also running to root out cronyism, corruption, and special interests at City Hall. I think those same issues apply in this election. Our best days are before us. But to get there, we need to remove the corruption, the cronyism, and the special interests that we have in the U.S. Congress today. It's why I'll support term limits as the first bill that I'll sponsor or co-sponsor when I'm in U.S. Congress. And that's why I'll work for you and the other people in this district and our country and no one else. But I'm going to need your help and your vote to get there. I ask for it humbly, and I'll be knocking on your door to ask for it in person soon. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Mendoza.
Yes. I want to thank Principal Wood and Educator Seymour and Emma Costa and Trustee Williams. And I want to thank you for being here because you are the constituents. You are the ones that are empowered to elect. I'm sitting here. I should be standing, but I'm sitting because I'm very much concerned with the direction this nation is going. Any one of us could be your representative because basically what it involves is constituent services. But I want you to think about one thing. There's someone on this table that decided to throw away 40,000 of your votes because first he said that he would never go against the will of the people, but then it was more expedient because the mayor called and said, I need your vote. And so he threw away 40,000 of your votes. Can you trust that person? That's all, folks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings our public forum to a close. I'd like to thank Ms. Isela Castañón Williams, our board president, Representative Emma Acosta, Dr. Randall Woods, our principal, for their assistance today. I would also like to thank all of the candidates who participated in today's forum. I leave you today with the words of Benjamin Disraeli, a British politician and author, when he said, "We live in an age when to be young and to be indifferent can no longer be synonymous. We must prepare for the coming hour. The claims of the future are represented by suffering millions, and the youth of a nation are the trustees of posterity." I thank you, and we'll see you at the polls. Thank you.